All righty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Again, it is Tuesday, and you know what that means. Time to continue our series in Mysteries of the Unexplained, going beyond the walls of time. And last time, we looked at a very interesting subject that talked about relative time and the future, the present, and the past all being relative dimensions of time, and possibly the past, the present, and the future could exist simultaneously at the same time. But, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me for another episode in this random series of Mysteries of the Unexplained. I personally found it interesting, and so I thought I would add it to the channel, my little explorations in this book. Today we will be looking at Cognition of the Future. Cognition of the Future, ladies and gentlemen, attempts to explain prophecy, must make suppositions about the future. And also, seen in a crystal ball. On the night of January 16th, 1969, Joseph DeLuise walked into a Chicago cocktail lounge and asked to see a newspaper. He wanted to read about the two trains that had crashed somewhere south of Chicago. The men at the bar suddenly paid attention. What crash? They'd heard nothing about such thing. There hadn't been anything in the newspapers. How did this man know about an event that may take place in the future? Well, let us dive in, ladies and gentlemen, to Going Beyond the Walls of Time and Mysteries of the Unexplained, Cognition of the Future, Dimensions of Time. What does it say? I'm going back. We also learned about an explanation of synchronicity on this series as well. That was a good video. But this has been about prophecies and future predictions. In the future, we'll get to monsters in the realm of miracles, the unquiet sky. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, let us continue with Cognition of the Future. Prophecies, premonitions, precognition. Those were the words I was trying to think of a second ago. But Cognition of the Future attempts to explain prophecy must make suppositions about the future. The most fundamental supposition is that events in the future do not yet exist and cannot, therefore, produce effects in the present. The path of explanation that stems from this view leads of necessity to various ideas of the future as a potential that somehow exists in the present. So like a future pull or a potentiality based on the situation of the present, but the future potential exists in the now. So is that somehow connecting the future to the past and the present? Well, the book continues, quote, in their simplest form, these ideas follow the analogy of the seed and the flower. A gardener can examine a seed and predict what flower it will produce. Hello, Beans. Saying hi again today. Kitten always likes to say hi, ladies and gentlemen. And once again, reading for purposes of teaching and commentary and expanding the mind so that through an increased awareness and understanding of the nature of ourselves and reality and psychology and spirituality, we can hopefully, with that awareness, increase the quality of our lives and the lives of those around us. And so, with that being said, the idea of the seed and the flower. And a gardener can examine a seed and predict what flower it will produce. So, could we examine the present and predict what kind of future it will produce? Would this then be prophecy? Or would you call it something else? Some premonitions may indeed stem from clues scarcely noticed in a conscious way. So usually noticed, I will add to that. The painting fell down the other day and broke a candle, so I was hoping when she jumped off there that didn't happen. However, this is nice to have in the background. It's nice to look at, even though it doesn't get the full lighting, but that's anyways. Some premonitions stem from clues that are rarely ever noticed in a conscious way. So this altered state of consciousness, or this mystical state of consciousness, or something other than our normal average waking consciousness, is what seems to be important for the oracles and the seers and the psychics and, those that have an ability or that tap into an ability that we all have to connect to some kind of field of information, the Akashic field, the etheric, whatever you want to call that, this field of information that seems to be able to give certain individuals in certain mystical states of consciousness or altered states an ability to see events before they take place, but not just see them, have a connection to it. I'll quit rambling and let us continue. An unfamiliar noise in a car, for example, may give rise to an accurate premonition of danger. The weakness of the theory in this form is that it requires the precognizer or the pre-recognizer an uncanny ability to analyze signs and indications that are not only imperceptible to the ordinary eye, but impossible to deduce theoretically. So, what clues in a dreamer's environment could prompt an accurate precognition of a disaster 6 months and 3,000 miles away? And this is the big question, because we could look at these things like, okay, they're just, it's what's the word? It's just a coincidence. Like you're looking for things to line up, and then, oh yeah, you're saying, yeah, he knew this was going to happen. In cases of when it's a very short time period, like a few moments later. But when we're talking about somebody predicting a major event 3,000 miles away from where they are in 6 months or 6 years or how many ever ahead of time, this is where it goes into a different category. Some extraordinary suggestions, the book continues, have been made to explain how the future may be unrealized but cognizable, so able to be understood in the present. One such suggestion by Gerhard Dietrich Wassermann, a mathematical physicist at the University of Durham in England, is that all events exist as timeless mental patterns. Now, isn't that interesting, going to our research into the ancient Egyptian philosophy of hermetics, in that it describes how the universe or reality takes place within the mind of God. Not giving it any less credibility of what we know it as already, but that the all is mental. And this, very fascinatingly, this mathematical physicist is telling us that all is mental, or anyways, that's different. That's different study. But he's telling us that all events exist as timeless mental patterns. Mathematical physicist, with which every living and non-living particle in the universe is associated with this existence of all events as timeless mental patterns. Why would he say this? The book continues, this idea owes something to the ancient belief. Okay, this guy might have been a studier of hermeneutics, ladies and gentlemen. But the ancient belief that the universe, the macrocosm, contains innumerable microcosms, as above, so below, and each replicating the features and order of the earth, his veins and arteries corresponding to streams and rivers. And nowadays, with our computer models, the universe looking much like the synapses in our brain, from the grandest scale all the way down to the smallest scale, looking the same, having these repeated patterns. And isn't that an interesting study in its own, that you can look at things at very large scales and then look at things at very small scales and see these patterns of nature or reality or the universe taking place in a microcosm and a macrocosm way. Thus, man was seen as a microcosm of the earth. Once again, like I said, his veins and arteries corresponding to streams and rivers and so on and so forth. By the end of the 17th century, the idea had undergone many transformations, but was still potent. The great philosopher and mathematician Baron Gottfried Wilhelm von Leibniz, that is one heck of a name, ladies and gentlemen. He was not only a great philosopher and mathematician, but his name was Baron Gottfried Wilhelm von Leibniz. For goodness sake. Amazing. Hopefully you're getting value, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. I wasn't sure if I was going to do a video today, and I was like, well, let's just read this part about cognition of the future and see if we even make it to seeing in a crystal ball. We might do that another day. However, this guy, Baron Gottfried Wilhelm von Leibniz, for example, wrote all the different classes of beings which together make up the universe are in the ideas of God, who knows distinctly their essential gradations. Only so many ordinates of a single curve, so closely united that it would be impossible to place others between any of them, since that would imply disorder and imperfection. This is amazing, ladies and gentlemen. I had no clue that these guys, these mathematicians from the 17th century and other times, are coming up with the very ideas that we've been learning on Wednesday in the Hermetic philosophy from thousands of years ago, telling us this same exact thing that these philosophers, these mathematicians, mathematical physicists are telling us now, is that everything in the universe, one guy put it like, everything which exists, all events exist as timeless mental patterns in which every living and non-living thing is associated with. Another mathematician, philosopher, says every class of being, living and non-living, in the universe and that make up the universe are in the ideas of God. The only reason I'm just so impressed. I didn't know that was going to come up here. But let me find it here, ladies and gentlemen. The God of wisdom, the scribe of the gods, gives us 7 principles, but the first one, we've been doing this on Wednesday, the principle of mentalism. The all is mind, the universe is mental. This principle embodies the truth that all is mind. It explains that the all, which is the substantial reality underlying all of the outward manifestations and appearances, which we know under the terms of the material universe, or the phenomenon life, matter, energy, in short, all that is apparent to our material senses is itself unknowable and undefinable, but which may be considered and thought of as universal, infinite, and a living mind. It also explains that the phenomenal world or universe is simply a mental creation of the all, however subject to the laws of created things, and that the universe as a whole and in parts or units has existed in the mind of the all, which mind we live and move and have our being. This principle, by establishing the mental nature of the universe, easily explains all of the varied mental and psychic phenomena that occupy such a large portion of public attention. The unexplained. So we find ourselves reading Mysteries of the Unexplained, ladies and gentlemen, but this is a synchronicity. Having been studying that, we now are reading today that these mathematicians and physicists and philosophers are telling us the same exact thing from different points throughout our history, continuing all the different classes of beings which are. So we just read from the sage God, the scribe of the gods, the God of knowledge and wisdom. And now Baron Gottfried Wilhelm von Leibniz is telling us the same thing, that all the different classes of beings which taken together make up the universe are in the ideas of God, who knows distinctly their essential gradations. Only so many ordinates of a single curve, so closely united that it would be impossible to place others between any two of them, since that would imply disorder and imperfection. Accordingly, the various orders of beings, animate and inanimate, so gradually approximate each other in chain, so closely linked to one another that it is impossible to determine precisely the point at which one ends and the next begins. This is explaining oneness and the nature of our oneness and our connectedness to all things, and how we are a part of God or this oneness. So this is really hilarious. I was just going to read about cognition of the future, but now we're going into spiritual philosophy again. This is what we do here on this channel. So if you've been here before, then you're probably enjoying this. If you were here for simply the cognition of the future, you're probably like, this guy is going way too spiritual with this, but this is where this leads. I mean, if you can't think about these kind of ideas without asking the grander questions about the nature of God and spirituality and how that relates to our physical reality, and what we might learn from that to gain a greater quality in our lives by making these comparisons and connections and contrasting. And anyways, thank you for being here. So gradually they approximate each other in their attributes and properties that they form a single chain, so closely linked to one another, it is impossible for us to determine at which point one being ends, or one book, or one table and chair and granule of dust in the air ends, and the next begins. And this concept of quote-unquote chain of being, then the animate and therefore the spiritual or psychic are connected with the inanimate by a gradation of shared attributes. This is really cool. See, this is why I wanted to share this book with you, because when I started reading some of these things, I was like, wow, this would be perfect for what I already talk about on this channel. And it gives us a new, different kind of perspective. For Leibniz, Baron von Leibniz, the implication was that someone with enough insight would see the future in the present as in a mirror. That's so weird. I also thought about that yesterday. I was standing in a parking lot looking across the street to a building, and there's a bunch of glass windows on the side of the building, and so they were reflecting the part of the street further than where I could see. And so I was like, that's cool. You can, by seeing something down there, you can kind of see the future. Before the vehicle actually comes by, you can see it coming, and then it disappears out of the mirror and shows up here and goes by. Even though you wouldn't be seeing the future, you would be seeing the vehicle before from the reflection. However, this idea of seeing the future in the present, as in a mirror. So that's another synchronicity. Do you ever have these? I'm sure all of us do, but how often do you notice them? Like, wow, I was just thinking about that yesterday. Now I'm reading it here. Or maybe that's just the reticular activating system. Like when you get a sweet blue car or whatever, and then you start driving around and everybody's got this blue car. However, going back to the spiritual and the psychic and its connection to attempts to explain precognition, premonition, and prophecies and cognition of the future. Leibniz's implication was that someone with enough insight could possibly see the future in the present. Another version, however, of the idea that the future lies hidden in the present was advanced by Adrian Dobbs, a mathematician and physicist at the University of Cambridge in 1965. As events unfold, he proposed, they actualize a relatively small number of the possibilities for change that exist at a subatomic level. In another dimension of time, what Dobbs called a cyclonic wavefront, this wavefront could be registered by the brain's neurons, at least in certain especially sensitive people, and also interpreted by those people. A metaphor may help us to clarify this process. Thank you, because I was about to say, wow, what does he really mean by all that? Well, ladies and gentlemen, imagine a pond or a lake, but we're going to use the term pond, and at one side of which a toy ship is launched. At the other side of the pond is a very small person. He is unable to see the ship, but as the ship travels forward, the waves it makes reach the shore on which he stands. As they travel across the pond, these waves pass around certain objects that may be in the pond as well. Weeds, leaves, a log that are fixed or slowly drifting on its surface. The objects thus cause and create disturbances in the waves, which the small person who has a lifetime's experience in these things is able to note in fine detail. So you can see the difference in the waves that are coming to you. From what he learns about the wave fronts, he not only obtains an image of the objects that produced them, but calculates how long it will be before they drift to the shore. This is an analogy of seeing the future using what he calls cytronic wavefront and looking at, once again, dimensions of time. He proposed they actualize a relatively small number of the possibilities, future potentials for change that exist at a subatomic level. Disturbances are caused that create in another dimension of time cytronic wave front. Gaining information from another dimension of time by having experience in these things and noting in fine detail. In this metaphor, the toy ship represents an event unfolding in time. However, its course across the pond represents one sec. All right, I'm sorry about that. I had somebody out the door, ladies and gentlemen, but we are good. So, this has been fantastic, looking at cognition of the future and the possibilities. I like the older perspectives better than this recent one. However, let us continue in Dobbs' theory. So, in this metaphor, once again, the ship represents an event that is unfolding in time, and so its course across the pond represents one of the many paths that it might have taken and the dimensions of time that it occurs in. The pond itself represents another dimension of time in which other factors are having an influence. The ship's bow wave represents Dobbs' cytronic wavefront, and the small person is, of course, the neuronal apparatus that receives the wavefront and converts it to a prediction. Granting that Dobbs' theory is purely hypothetical, and that no cytronic wave has ever been discovered, and the difficulty is in suggesting a neuronal mechanism by which the observer distinguishes the wavefront of a particular event from the presumable maelstrom of wavefronts and produced by simultaneously unfolding events in time. Again, the farther away the event is in the future, the more numerous the possibilities, the more numerous the wavefronts, and the more complex. The problem is to try to solve how someone could predict or have precognition, premonition, or prophecy of something many months, years, and many hundreds, if not thousands of miles away and in the future. How, once again, is this possible, ladies and gentlemen? Such, in general, are some of the theories that regard the future as being in some way a potential implicitly accessible to someone now in the present moment. And such are the difficulties and limitations of attaining them. That, ladies and gentlemen, was a boom to cognition of the future. Now let's quickly do, like we promised at the beginning, the story of Joseph de Luis in 1969, titled Seen in a Crystal Ball. Our short story begins on the night. It was a rainy night, I'll add. Not too cold, but still the rain gave you that slight chill. No, the book doesn't actually say any of that. But that adds to the story, doesn't it? You could smell the wet pavement as he walked down the sidewalk. Joseph de Luis walked into a Chicago cocktail lounge. It was busy, but not the kind of busy that makes you want to turn around and find another. He continued in and asked to see a newspaper. He mentioned that he wanted to read about the two trains that had crashed somewhere south of Chicago. The men at the bar suddenly paid attention. What crash? They hadn't heard about nothing. They've heard nothing about anything of the sort. There hadn't been anything in the newspapers. Where? Somewhere south of here, DeLuise said. Two trains hit each other in the fog. It was the worst train disaster we've had since World War II. 25 years ago. It tells you how old this book is, ladies and gentlemen. Many people were injured, and even some, unfortunately, didn't make it. The bartender turned on the radio. It was 11 o'clock, and there was no news of a train wreck. 2 hours later, at 1 a.m. on January 17th, two Illinois Central trains collided head on, you know, in the fog, 45 miles south of Chicago. 47 people were hurt, and 3, unfortunately, didn't make it. It was the worst train disaster in the area in the last 25 years. DeLuise had spoken on a radio show on December 14th in 1968 in Gary, Indiana, and predicted that the crash would occur in 5 or 6 weeks. Now, this goes back to this whole question we've been asking today. How is this possible? Even if this is just a made-up story, there's many, many accounts of this in many, many different times from different people throughout our history. What sort of man was this Joseph DeLuise? Well, he worked as a hairdresser, never finished the 8th grade, and like many scryers, uses a crystal ball to make his predictions. It says, see this on page 302. We're on page 30. There's 244. What is this? The glossary? 298. What did it say? 302? 300, 301. The crystal vision. The crystal vision, ladies and gentlemen. When the eyes of a painting, print, or statue move, we may discern the will of God, a hyperactive imagination, or an instance of the phenomenon known as scrying, or crystal gazing. That will give us an explanation about that. I think maybe that would be appropriate after this story. This video is running on. I didn't know it was going to go this long, ladies and gentlemen. But I didn't want to leave you hanging there. All right. On television and in the press, he has foretold many disasters, this gentleman. On November 25th, 1967, he predicted the collapse of a bridge. 3 weeks later, December 16th, the Silver Bridge across the Ohio River collapsed. On January 8th, 1968, predicted that there would be no major riots in the country in the coming year, but that there would be an actual, I don't know if I can actually say that word. It's a certain keyword. However, on April 7th, 1968, the governor of Illinois declared an outbreak of violence in Chicago to be an insurrection. 5,000 federal troops were flown in. Wow. December 15th, 1968, predicted that the Kennedy family would be involved in a tragedy connected with water. Later, he saw a woman drowning in that context. On July 1969, Mary Jo Cognition was drowned in Chappaquiddick in a car accident involving Senator Edward Kennedy. Sorry. Blah, blah, blah. Easy for me to say. Even on May 21st, 1969, Joseph DeLuise, the psychic who used a crystal ball to see the future, predicted the crash of a jet plane near Indianapolis. He saw that 79 people would be lost, and somehow the number 330 would be involved. At 3:30 p.m., September 9th, 1969, An Albany Airlines DC-9 collided with a private plane near Indianapolis. The 4 crew members and 78 passengers were lost, as well as the pilot who had flown the private plane, Joseph DeLuise, with Tom Valentine from Psychic Mission. That was the source reference for that. But that, ladies and gentlemen, was the story of Seen in a Crystal Ball. I don't like a lot of the stories in this book because they always have to deal with death and destruction and disasters. But for some reason, when it comes to prophecy, that's what gets people's attention. Used a crystal ball to see into the future. He focused on the shiny surface until it becomes misty, and in the cloud-like shapes that form over the crystal, he can perceive what is filtering through his senses. Scrying, the term that comes from the word descry, meaning to perceive things at a distance, has been practiced all over the world in every period of history, and scryers have employed not only crystal balls, but mirrors, pools of water, thumbnails, ink blots, and virtually anything that shines. Not everyone, however, has the gift. But those who have can see all manner of wonderful things by staring into the chosen, shiny surface. The experience was well described by Andrew Lang, a turn-of-the-century Oxford scholar known for his research in this area. That, ladies and gentlemen, was a boom to going beyond the walls of time, prophecy, premonition, precognition, seeing the future. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, that was fantastic. Hopefully you enjoyed that as much as I did. I'm looking for my bookmark now. But remember, there is no way to happiness, because happiness is the way. What does that mean? That means we have to begin. It means all the things we've been telling ourselves. Oh, when I get this far and I have that much, or if I get this house and have that car, or have this much money, or become this in life, it's all irrelevant. Because when we can create the ability through practice and through diligence, but when we can create the ability within ourselves to bring happiness to life as a process rather than a result that we're looking for to get somewhere out here, when we have it and we can bring it to life, then all the things that we've been telling ourselves, oh, when I get this and get that, it's no longer necessary because we already are there. And then, hopefully, the entire journey is wonderful. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I love and appreciate each and every one of you that spends time here with me on this channel, in the comments later, and especially in the live chat premiere of these videos. And so, seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, through greater awareness and understanding of ourselves and the nature of reality and spirituality and psychology. And remember to seek to discover the lost wisdom of the ages and the mysteries of our history. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Be sure to expand the description below. In the video info box, you can hit more, and then under that, it'll expand more, and it'll have links to this book so you can get it for yourself and put it on your shelf so you can follow along in future episodes, as well as just to have for personal reference. Physical copies, ladies and gentlemen. Physical copies. Also a link to my Etsy shop and my landscape paintings, as well as a link to the ultimate antioxidant, ladies and gentlemen. C60 Power, Nobel Prize winning. Give yourself the gift of health. All right. With that being said, love and appreciate it, ladies and gentlemen. Until next time, be the change that you want to see. Be the example that you want to set. No, 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 no.